everybody. Thank you all for being here. I'm Glaucia Silva. I teach here in the Department of Portuguese, and I'm also the first vice president of the Faculty Federation, which is our union on campus. Some of you study with your Professor Eric, who is also an executive board member in the union. There's another executive board member back there. Anywho, so welcome. Thank you all for joining our panel. And I'll get to repression and worker resistance. I did not want to misquote. Today, with us, and if he arrives in time, he will join us. Jamie will join us. But right now, we have Tripp Hopkins to my far left and Elsie Redmond. And it is my absolute honor and pleasure to be able to introduce them to you. Tripp is a community organizer who advocates for BIPOC and LGBTQ plus rights. Tripp is a member of PVD Flowers Worker Co-op, where they advocate for restorative justice and fight against the ramifications of the war on drugs. Tripp is also a volunteer at House of Codec. Did I get that right?
Perfectly.
A queer youth transitional shelter. They advocate with a focus on those who are underrepresented, with an emphasis on Blackness and queerness. Elsie Redmond is a longtime labor organizer and youth mentor with EWOC, Emergency Worker Organizing Committee. Elsie is a union campaign and a strategic community organizer with 35 years of experience across a variety of industries. He has helped unions and grassroots groups with leadership development, contract negotiations, grievance monitoring, fostering community alliances, government lobbying, and fiduciary oversight. Because I was running out of breath. Elsie has worked with unions and community organizations, including roles as the deputy trustee with the Bakery Confectionery Tobacco Workers and Grain Millers International Union, lead policy and community organizer with Warehouse Workers for Justice, and community groups and coalitions in Chicago, including the Empowerment Zone, the Coalition to Protect Public Housing, lead organizer at the Center for Labor and Community Research, West Side Health Authority, as leader organizer, executive director with the Northwest Austin Council, and organizer with the Illinois Acorn. Please help me welcome our wonderful speakers. Thank you both for being here. So Tripp will start, right, telling us a little bit about his experience. Each of them will speak for about 25 minutes to give us time for discussion and questions you may have. Tripp, please.
Thank you so much. So hello, yes, my name is Tripp Hopkins. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns. Yeah, I want to tell y'all a little bit about PVD Flowers, which is a worker cooperative weed dispensary starting in Providence, Rhode Island, and a little bit more about the work that I do in Providence. And yeah, I don't have exactly 25 minutes of material ready, so I'm more than happy to open up some more space at the end for questions if anybody has questions. But to start off, what is PVD Flowers? So PVD Flowers, as you know, worker cooperative weed dispensary starting in Providence, Rhode Island. We're made up of all BIPOC workers right now. We're planning on opening with a full BIPOC team. And we started in, I'd say about It was around August of 2022. To give y'all some more context, that same year, weed was legalized in Rhode Island by Governor Dan McKee. That happened in about May 2022. We did a lot of work to get that bill passed. By that point, PVD Flowers was not an organization yet, but the organization that PVD Flowers was born from, Reclaim Rhode Island, and other local organizations in Providence had done a lot of work to get that bill passed. Reclaim Rhode Island is a leftist organization in Providence. We focus on organizing and activism around tenant policy, around marijuana justice. It's kind of how I got involved with PVD Flowers, and it was my liaison to getting involved with organizing and activism in general. So it means a lot to me. And Reclaim Rhode Island and other local organizations got that bill passed through their advocacy. And in that bill, it's called the Rhode Island Cannabis Act. It included a lot of amazing things and a lot of the things that we got to follow through on right now. For example, in that bill, we had automatic record expungement. So anyone who has a marijuana related offense on their record before 2025 can get that completely scrubbed off of their record, which is something we pushed for a lot. And one of the things we're most excited about in that bill is it's allocated 24 retail licenses for marijuana dispensaries. So what this means is 24 licenses are going to be available in the state, and those 24 licenses are going to be divided into 6 zones. So split up Rhode Island into 6 zones. Every single zone gets 4 licenses. And those licenses are really, really important to what we're doing at PVD Flowers, because for each zone, 2 of those licenses are going to be reserved for social equity and worker cooperative applicants. So pretty much what that means is 2 licenses will go up to whoever can apply for that business license and receive it. It could be any company, any organization. But those 2 that I just mentioned, let me start off with the social equity. The social equity would only be applicable to people applying for a retail dispensary who have a company that's made up of at least 50% Black or directly impacted workers, which means that people that would be living in impoverished areas of Rhode Island, people who have direct experience in the carceral system or have family members that have been part of the carceral system, and or if that business is owned by at least 50% Black or BIPOC or formerly incarcerated, or impacted workers. So it would either have to be 50% of the employees, or the ownership would have to belong to indirectly impacted people. And the other one I was talking about, the worker cooperative license, that is specifically for worker cooperatives and worker cooperatives only. So anyone applying for that license, in theory, because a lot of provisions in this law still have not been completely grounded, but in theory, someone would have to be, an organization would have to be incorporated as a worker cooperative before they can apply for that license. So a lot has happened in order to get where we're at today. And we continue to fight every single day to make sure that all of these different provisions that we've seen in this bill are held up and are met to the standard that we want them to be met. For example, today, right after this conference, there is a listening session by the Cannabis Control Commission. The Cannabis Control Commission is one of the new boards that was created by the Rhode Island Cannabis Act. There's the Cannabis Advisory Board and then the Cannabis Control Commission. The Cannabis Control Commission, it decides everything that has to do with the legality, with the licensing for retail businesses, and for marijuana retail businesses, and for weed legalization in Providence. So they're the people that we have to report to in order to get our license. And what's been good is while we had a bit of an issue with the commission at the start, where some of the members elected to the commission were, well, one of the members was a former police officer. Some of them are direct aides to the governor, and in that administration, in Dan McKee's administration, we've taken some issues. We haven't released anything publicly as PVD Flowers, like saying whether we support or not support people appointed to the commission. But us as organizers, as leftists in Providence, have preferences on who we want to see guiding marijuana policy and who we don't want to see. And while we've had some issues around that, the listening sessions that the Cannabis Control Commission has set up have been really beneficial to get the community voiced in the decisions for cannabis. These listening sessions have been happening for they've been happening since this past summer and this past fall. Pretty much they open up the State House and different locations to the public, so the public can speak on what they'd like to see from the Cannabis Control Commission and what they'd like to see in the Rhode Island Cannabis Act. And that is super important, because without that direct communication from the people, without actually hearing what the directly impacted people of Providence and Rhode Island would like to see from the Cannabis Control Commission and in the Rhode Island Cannabis Act, there can't be any meaningful work that is done revolving that act. And in connection to that, it kind of hurts the work that we do as PVD Flowers. We have been hearing directly from the community since we've opened, since we've started. I shouldn't say open because we don't have a dispensary location quite yet, but since we've started. The first thing we did as a dispensary to kind of get this information from the public is we hosted little interviews. Like, we do street interviews, we do interviews with our friends that we know who smoke weed, and we'd ask them questions like, what would you like to see in a worker-owned dispensary in your local area? And what is important that a dispensary that focuses on social equity and repairing the harms of the war on drugs, what is important that you see from this dispensary doing to fight against these? And we were able to get a lot of great information from the community. We were able to kind of get some good ideas on what they'd like the dispensary to be like. We got a lot of responses of people saying like dispensaries that they've been in before look like Apple stores. We want a dispensary that's more authentic, where you talk to the people, where you know the people there. You're not going to an iPad, putting in your order and waiting in a kiosk. But since the beginning, getting that like authentic response from the community has kind of been how we've kept ourselves grounded, how we've kept ourselves oriented as a community-based dispensary startup, and is the main reason why I'm so passionate about what I do. At the end of the day, it is about those people who are directly impacted. I came to Providence as a college student. I dropped out of college and started doing the work that I do now. And I realized that although I have dark skin, although the police will still see me as a threat, there are people who have been in Providence who have lived through more experiences around the carceral system and around police brutality and around being impoverished that I have not experienced. I have privilege in that way, and I want to be able to use that privilege to make space for those people who have been directly impacted to have a spot in this cannabis industry. And moving forward about PVD Flowers, so to give y'all a little bit more of a timeline, when we started in August of 2022, the members of PVD Flowers, at the time, it was me and a couple other members from Reclaim Rhode Island who had initially gotten started with PVD Flowers. It was about 3 of us, and we were low on numbers. We knew that we needed to recruit more people, and we knew that above all, we needed experience and we needed knowledge about opening a dispensary, because none of us come from a weed background. We didn't know that much about co-ops at that time either. We were organizers and we were activists, and we had the motivation and the time. We just didn't quite have the resources. So in September of 2022, we were able to start a program called the Black Co-op U cohort. This was hosted by an organization called Co-op Cincy. It's a Cincinnati-based organization. They do different worker cooperative and union outreach in the city. Like, for example, they teach that class, which allows for startup worker cooperatives and existing worker cooperative businesses to refresh themselves and learn about what it means to be a worker cooperative, like to develop a business plan, to develop their skills about organizing within that community. And we did that class from about September until November. We were able to graduate that, get a whole certificate. They were able to give us a grant for participating in that. And that kind of laid the foundation for us to start really taking what it means to become a worker cooperative seriously. If there's one thing I've learned about starting the process to be a worker cooperative, is that it takes a tremendous amount of effort. A worker cooperative, what makes it like so different from what you'll see in a typical LLC or a privately owned company, is that everyone that is making up that worker owner population, everyone who works at that company, and because it's a worker cooperative, owns a portion of that company, needs to come in and needs to put in effort. It's not like you can be like, oh, let the boss handle it. Like, everyone needs to show up to the meetings. Everyone needs to show up to get your business plan in order. Everyone needs to show up to get all of your documents in order. And it is a lot of effort. But all that being said, there aren't any other people I'd rather be doing this work with than the community of organizers and activists that I come from. I know that we know why it's so important that we're doing this work now. And I know that I can trust on my fellow PVD Flowers members and friends to come through and help me when I don't know something, and when they don't know something, I can help them. And while it's been really, really difficult to make sure that we all can organize our schedules to show up at the right time to make those decisions, when we can put our minds together to make those decisions, it's absolutely amazing. And pretty much after the Co-op Cincy cohort, we were able to work on bylaws. And if there's one thing that is like the most important thing about a worker cooperative, it's developing bylaws. Bylaws are, as they sound, they're kind of like agreements, laws that govern what the co-op is going to be and how the inside of the co-op is going to be run. For example, in our bylaws, we go over a lot of things, but one of the biggest things we go over is what is going to be the quota for a group decision to be made. So in a worker cooperative, most of the decisions that are going to be made revolving the business are going to be made by a group. They're going to be made democratically. So people are going to have to vote on an issue. That issue is going to be voted on, and depending on the outcome of that election, that issue is either going to be handled or it's going to be not handled. And every single time, if we had to, like, for example, every single time do a election where every single person had to vote yes in order for something to be done, as you can imagine, that would take a lot of time. That'd be very difficult. So the bylaws, what they allow us to decide is, like, how are we going to make those decisions? Are we going to make those decisions by unanimous vote? Are we going to make those decisions by a 75% vote? Is it going to be a majority vote? And by making, like, informed and smart decisions in the bylaws, we can kind of expect what's gonna take us more time in the future, and we can prepare to have a 75% vote on something that'd be really hard to have a unanimous vote for example. So bylaws are absolutely key. We have been working on those since after the co-op Cincy cohort, and we still are working on those today. We have a pretty completed document with our bylaws, but every single week we're looking at them again, we're revisiting them, we're making sure they're as fulfilled as they can be. And we've also been able to work on just a typical business plan. The business plan I had less involvement in because we've within PVD Flowers, we've kind of split up into different committees where, for example, I'm part of the outreach committee where a lot of my work ends up being talking to people, having interviews, hosting events. But we also have a committee that focuses on the rules and the regulations, the bookkeeping, the money. And while we come together to discuss those, that's been a different committee that's been working on the business plan. But we have a pretty concise business plan going up as well. So we can start presenting to investors about how we see ourselves making a profit, what our year profits are going to be, like how long it's going to take us from open to seeing a profit. And it's been really interesting dealing with that, I'd say, and learning about that because all these investors that we need to talk to are still going to see us as a business. They're still going to be looking to someone or some specific single entity that they can invest their money in and hold that person or that entity accountable if that investment does not go through. And especially if like looking at banks, it's been tough because banks expect you to have one person in their name to open a bank account. So navigating investing and getting our business plan in order has been difficult because people just aren't used to what it means to be a worker cooperative. But between getting our bylaws together and getting our business plan together, I think we're in a really, really good spot to continue where we're at, to look for a location, and to hopefully open by the end of next year. A location has been probably our biggest challenge so far. Opening a location is not opening a location. Choosing a location is incredibly difficult because of all the different zoning requirements that come with having a location. We have to make sure we have enough room for parking. We have to make sure we're not too close to any school zones. We have to talk to different real estate developers and make sure that they're open to selling it to us in the first place. And we've been looking at locations for almost a year now. And there's still a lot of effort that needs to go into that. So that's going to be one of our biggest challenges moving forward and probably like our key to opening at the time that we'd like to open. And yeah, PVD Flowers is something that, like, when I typically think of marijuana businesses opening after the legalization of weed in the state, it used to, like, honestly kind of scare me because I would think of all of the different people who typically end up being white that have capital to invest into the cannabis business into a cannabis industry that opens when state legalizes weed. Like, I think of how easy it is for them to simply swoop in, start a cannabis business, and continue the trends we've seen of Black and brown people and impoverished people not being able to reap the benefits of the cannabis industry. Thank you. And the fact that we were able to open up some of these different ways through the Rhode Island Cannabis Act of allowing there to be businesses owned by people who look like me and people who have seen what it's like to be impacted by racist policing and the war on drugs. The fact that we have that here is really what keeps me going. This is an amazing opportunity that we've been given in Providence and Rhode Island, and we want to make sure that we can completely see it through. And another thing that makes me really happy and makes me motivated to keep doing this is that we're not alone in this fight. In addition to PVD Flowers, there's a dispensary being opened called Free Yo Mind. That's FREYOMIND. By some of our peers in our organizing and activist spheres. They are working directly with members from Break the Cycle and Behind the Walls Committee, which are a bit information about those. Break the Cycle is a group of I know many of you are Eric Larson students, so y'all will probably know about this, but it is a group of formerly incarcerated and people impacted by the carceral system who are forming a worker co-op in order to fight against the carceral system and kind of showcase their strengths and talents despite the fact that the carceral system has tried so hard to push them down. And Behind the Walls Committee, the Behind the Walls Committee is part of an organization in Providence called DARE. I believe I mentioned it earlier. That's Direct Action for Rights and Equality, not DARE as in the drug one, not the drug one. But the Behind the Walls Committee is a committee, again, of formerly incarcerated people who meet weekly at that community space to discuss what they can do to further the interests of formerly incarcerated people and fight for equality. For example, one of the campaigns they're doing right now is the Bail on 32 campaign. And the Bail on 32 campaign is a campaign in Rhode Island that is around a court ruling. The court ruling is called 32F. And this court ruling pretty much states that people in probation in Rhode Island, when they are stopped and when they are taken in for a probation violation, they can be held without bail before the probation violation hearing for upwards of 45 days. In the books, it says 2 weeks, but a lot of people end up staying at the Corrections Institute for up to 45 days. And during that time, people can lose custody of their children, people can lose their jobs, their lives can change. And it kind of just shows how probation is another way of holding Black and brown people in this country under the carceral system. And even when people end up leaving prison, how they're still completely tied to prison, how they still have one foot in the door, because at any point, from a minor traffic violation to a disorderly conduct violation, they can be held in prison for up to over a month and be denied basic rights. So what they do is amazing. And as PVD Flowers, we just pretty much want to make sure that we're getting our members and we're getting all of our information from organizations and committees like that already exist, and making sure that we can just remain as authentic as possible to the community and relate to what's already going on and make sure that everything stays in order. But I'll stop rambling. Thank you so much for listening, y'all.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tripp. And